This video is going to go over some of the foundational yoga poses that you could use to build your practice as a new student. These poses are not necessarily easy or hard. They're accessible to many people as they begin their practice, but always understand that if a pose doesn't feel right for you, then always back out of it. Take your time to slowly come back out of it and try it again, maybe listening to the cues or asking your instructor, like me, about other modifications that you could use for the pose. So these are really just some of the basic poses that you'll see in a lot of the sequences that we do this semester. What I'm going to do is show you the anatomy of the pose first. So I'll show you a picture of what is happening in your body as you attempt the pose, and then I'll demonstrate the pose, and then we'll move on. So this is a short sequence. It's really not meant to be done as a class. This is really just an instructional video to allow you to take a look at what the poses look like in your body, what they look like on one body, mine, understanding that they will probably look different when you attempt the poses. Other videos will actually demonstrate a sequence that you could do. So I wouldn't plan on following along as a practice with this video. I would look at it as more of an instructional video. The first pose we're going to start with is something called constructive rest pose. This is not just a pose limited to a yoga practice. This is something done by physical therapists. It's something that's highly recognized as a really good pose for relaxing the psoas muscle. The psoas muscle is a lot of things, but one of the things it is a major muscle that connects the top half to the bottom half of the body. And it runs, as you can see through the slide, it runs from the bottom, from the legs up through the spine. And it's also a muscle that tends to cause a lot of problems for people. So a lot of times students will talk to me about feeling a pain, sort of that goes maybe down their low back, down through their buttocks, into their legs. And a lot of times it could be a psoas that it's tight. It could be something that is pinched. A lot of times the sciatic nerve gets pinched when muscles in this area are tight. This muscle, the psoas muscle, is tightened by repetitive motion of sitting, driving. When we don't stretch it, it tends to lock short. And then when you start to do activities that open it up, if you don't allow it to relax first, it can cause some pain. You could injure the muscle. So we start every sequence, or not every, but a lot of sequences, I will start with a constructive rest pose. And it's really just a relaxing pose. Your legs are going to be bent, the knees are going to be resting in onto themselves. There's very little work that you have to do. It's usually very comfortable for people who have low back issues, and maybe it's not comfortable for them to lie completely down on their back. Constructive rest pose is a nice way to still allow the body to relax without injuring the low back. So let's take a look at what the pose looks like in my body. So here I am demonstrating the pose in my backyard. And you can see it's a pretty relatively easy pose to get into. You're just lying down on your back, trying to rest as much of the body as you possibly can. You can choose to rest your hands anywhere. This is also a pose that I might take in a yoga practice. I might take the time to cue breathing. So I may have you put your hands on your chest or your belly to start the yogic breathing process. It's a nice time to just kind of center yourself. A lot of times we come into a yoga class stressed out and sort of thinking about the day in front of us or the day behind us. So this is a nice opportunity in this pose to just kind of think about getting into your practice and getting into your body. Our next pose is a favorite of a lot of people. It's called Sukhasana, or sweet pose. And Sukhasana is what you probably recognize as cross-legged pose. And you can see from the slide here just some of the muscles that are involved in this pose. Sukhasana, just like constructive rest pose, is often a pose of transition, or it could be used as a pose of centering. So a lot of times we'll start a practice doing this pose because it's a nice time. There's not a lot of work involved. You're really just trying to sit up with a nice straight spine, and you're trying to just feel your body and come into the space of your body. So this is what the pose looks like from a muscular and skeletal perspective. So let's take a look at what it looks like in your body. So here I am again, coming into Sukhasana. And it's always nice to take a minute to just kind of find some adjustments, make sure you're comfortable. Oftentimes we will sit in Sukhasana for quite a few minutes. Again, I will usually lead you through a centering or a breathing exercise here to just get you into the headspace that's necessary for our practice. For people who have a difficulty sitting cross-legged, there are options. You could have one leg straight out. You could be leaning against something with both legs straight out. You can take the time to find what's most comfortable for you. And again, sometimes I'll cue you to put your hand on your chest and your belly. As we work through yogic breathing, it's good to connect to what it feels like when you're taking a full diaphragmatic breath. So there's a lot that we can do in Sukhasana, but it's also a really nice time to rest and get ready for the rest of the practice, or even just to think about the practice that you just had. Another foundational pose, or two foundational poses, would be cat and cow pose. We do this oftentimes at the beginning of a yoga practice because it's really great for bringing some lubrication and movement to the spine. We oftentimes will start with the spine in a practice. When I design yoga sequences, I often think about how to make sure that I move your spine in all 6 directions. Most of the time, we live our lives in the frontal plane. So we tend to be sitting down or driving or looking down at our phones or our laptops. And so our body is tending to curl down on top of itself, right? So we sort of curl into that fetal position. One of the things that we look for in a yoga practice is to make sure that the spine is able to move through the other planes of movement. So we want to open up into the back plane. We want to move from side to side. We want to twist. And cat and cow is a great way of doing that. It's a great pose to warm up the spine. It works other muscles as well, of course, but we use this primarily as a spine opener. So we start by sort of curling the tailbone up, letting the belly dip down, and taking the gaze upward. And then we curl the tailbone under, round the back, round the spine, let the head drop. And we do this a few times on the cue of breath. So as we inhale, curl the tail up, drop the belly, exhale, curl tail down, round the back, let the head drop. And doing it with breath, of course, helps the energy in the body, and it allows you to avoid injury. When we're focused on our breath, we're not letting our mind wander. And a lot of times injury happens when we let our minds wander. So what we're doing in cat and cow is really just trying to allow the spine to wake up to the fact that it's going to be moved in different positions. It's a great thing to do if you're practicing in the morning, if you've been asleep all night. And it's an excellent thing, of course, to do at night, because if you are like me and you spend a lot of time either in your car or sitting at a desk, your spine will get sort of tight and constricted. The stress will start to build up, and cat and cow will really open up the back and open up the spine. So let's take a look at how cat and cow looks. So we start by setting up in a table position. Knees are under the hips, wrists are under the shoulders, the feet are untucked. And we can move through the cat and cow motions slowly with breath. And again, we're just looking for some movement, some awakening of the spine. We want to stretch it out. We want to bring some lubrication. We want to bring some energy to the spine before we start to move it in other positions during our yoga practice. Our next foundational yoga pose is locust pose. And this, as you can tell, uses a lot of muscles of the body. And there are modifications for locust pose. This is the full expression of the pose, but it may not be accessible for everyone, at least not at first. But locust pose really moves into the back plane of the body. So, like I had mentioned, so many of us live our lives in the sagittal plane, the forward plane, where we're sort of always moving at the front of our body. Our arms and our legs are in front of us, and we're reaching our hands out in front of us. And so, as a counterbalance to that, doing a locust pose is going to bring the body into the back plane. So our legs and our arms and our head are reaching out towards the back of the body. And to do so, you have to activate a lot of different muscles. It's really a full body pose, and it feels really terrific. I think that's one of the best things about locust pose is that even if you do a very different modification of this, a different variety of this pose, then you will still notice that just stretching the back and moving into the back plane can really feel excellent for the spine, especially at the end of the day. If you do this, though, I would recommend, as is true with any back bending poses, anytime you're back bending, it's an energetic pose. It's an energizing pose. It's really going to fire up the body and the energy body. And so this is something I would do at the beginning. And when I practice in the morning, I do a lot of back bends because they're energizing. I wouldn't do the full I wouldn't do the full expression of this pose at night simply because I'm not looking for something energizing at night, right? I'm looking for relaxation. So you can do different variations of kind of getting into the back plane of the body at night, but this full expression would be very energizing. I would not do this at night. So let's take a look at a variation of this pose. So anytime you are thinking about doing locust, you start just kind of in a neutral spine, and then we start by lifting just the legs off. It's a nice way of just kind of warming up the spine, getting the body ready for the work ahead. Another variation is to bring the arms behind you and lift the chest and the head up off the ground. This is also a nice variation, and it gives you the same feeling without as much work. And always in between every variation, you want to make sure that you rest, allow the neck to come back to neutral, and just take a minute to bring the body back to a neutral position. This is another variation of locust here. This is the full expression of the pose where both the arms and the legs are reaching up. Make sure not to compress the back of the neck. Reach the crown of the head forward, making sure the back of the neck is open, and then come back down and rest a little bit. Again, resting your forehead on your arms, on your hands. And then this is a wheel pose, and this is really great for really opening up shoulders, chest, thighs. This is a fantastic pose for the morning. It's like a full body stretch, and it's a really, really nice way of getting into the back plane of the body. And here's another crowd favorite. This is one of my favorite yoga poses of all time. This is child's pose. And this is also used as a pose that you could use in between other poses as a moment of rest. It could be a nice way to reconnect with your breath. If you find yourself going through a yoga sequence and you're out of breath or you've lost track of your breath, child's pose is a great way to come back and just take a moment to reconnect. When you are in this pose, you can feel your belly expanding as you breathe. And so it's a really nice way to come back to that rhythmic yogic breath and paying attention to it. Our minds will definitely wander as we're doing yoga. And so this is a great way, once you notice that with practice, you'll start to recognize that you're losing track of your breath, your mind is wandering. And so taking a child's pose is a great opportunity to just kind of put your head down, block out the distractions around you, and come back to the breath. And you can see here the anatomy of the pose, the muscles that are being stretched. Arms can be out in front of you as they are in this slide, but you can also bring them back and allow them to just lie down next to next to your legs. Sometimes that's a nice rest for the shoulders. This is great for stretching out the ankles, the feet. All of the leg muscles are getting really compressed and stretched. The glutes, it really opens up the back. It can really feel great for your neck if you're tense at the end of the day. You can have your forehead resting on the ground. It's a nice way of just giving some rest to the neck. If in this pose you find that your head does not reach the mat, you can make a little tent with your hands or just kind of a shelf with your fists and allow your forehead to rest on those. It's really nice to let the forehead come in contact with something in this pose. You don't want your head just kind of hanging there. Part of it is that you want to create an energetic circle. You want the circuit of energy to be complete. You don't want anything just kind of hanging out there in this pose. This is a really nice pose for moving prana around the body, moving energy around. It's a pose of rest. It can be a pose where, again, because you're looking down at the mat, you can find yourself focusing again on your practice instead of looking around the room. So let's take a look at how this pose can look. And so here's me sort of adjusting and coming into my child's pose. I'm reaching my hands out in front of me. My forehead is coming in contact with the mat. The knees can be a little bit far apart, or you can have them together. It really depends on how you feel. I think I tend to keep my knees far apart when I'm at the beginning of a practice, when I'm not quite warmed up yet. And so it kind of gives your hips a little bit more room. And you can allow yourself to just take a moment. Just take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to come back to your practice and rest. Our next pose is downward facing dog pose. And so you can see here that there are also lots of muscles involved in this pose. This is technically an inversion. It's also a forward fold. So there's a lot of different things going on here. You're moving in the frontal plane. It's a pose that's used as a pose of transition. It's considered by some people as a pose of rest, although most people new to yoga do not consider this pose very restful. So if you find yourself struggling in this pose, please recognize that that is quite normal. There's a lot of work going on here. You are basically holding up the weight of your body between the palms of your hands and the balls of your feet. So, and you're upside down. So your heart is over your head. So there's a ton of stuff going on here. It's something that you work up to over time. As you practice more, you may notice that downward facing dog becomes more comfortable. But please, please, please take it slowly and recognize that it's a tough one. It takes years and years for this to be a position of rest. You can take a look at all of the muscles that are involved. It's a great pose for stretching all of the long muscles of the body. It's a great pose for stretching out the back and the spine. It's great for resting the neck. You can allow your head to hang comfortably. Gravity will just kind of pull your head down a little bit and it stretches out your neck. If you're somebody like me who tends to carry stress in your shoulders, this is a great way to counteract that. It opens up all of the muscles, the hamstrings. For people who have tight hamstrings, they're going to notice that downward facing dog is tough to do with straight legs. So I always cue my students to keep their knees nice and soft. I know that the skeleton on the slide here has straight legs, but when you practice this, I would always advise people to try to keep their knees as soft, a slight bend in the knees at first, until you're comfortable with how your hamstrings feel. Some people have very short hamstrings. If you're a runner, or if you participate in certain sports where you're doing repetitive motion, forward motion, hamstrings tend to be short and tight. And so this pose is going to be difficult for you with straight legs. Do not ever force your legs straight. As you warm up during the practice. And as you practice over years, you may notice that your hamstrings have more space and you're able to straighten the legs out a little bit more. But you never ever want to push yourself into a straight leg on this pose because you're only going to hurt the hamstrings. This is, like I said, this is a variation of the pose. Everyone's going to look different in the pose. The most important thing is to pay attention to how you feel. And I mentioned the hamstrings because that tends to be where most people tend to go, oh, wait, I can't straighten my legs here. You'll notice in the slide also that the heels are not touching the ground. And that's something that you never want to force either. I know that a lot of my students will say, oh, I've seen a picture on Instagram of this, and that my heels are supposed to be touching. And so they try to jam their feet so that their heels are touching. That may never happen. That's an anatomical thing. It may be that your heels just don't reach the ground. You can work towards that over time, but you never want to jam your heels down. That's really not the point of the pose. You want to make sure that your hands and your feet are about hips width distance apart from each other. Your toes are facing forward. Your hands are spread, the fingers are spread out wide, and you've got a nice, great grip on the mat. You've got a nice feel to the mat. You've got a great foundation. And your body is in almost an upside down V shape. Again, your back, you don't want your back to be arched. One of the cues that I often remind students of in this pose is to imagine that the tailbone is curling up to the sky. A lot of people will round their back in this pose. And so you want to start with the tailbone and really make sure the tailbone's curled up. For most people, that's going to mean that their legs have to be bent. So your body, if you're paying attention to certain things, your body's going to tell you what you're supposed to look like in this pose. So if you start with the tailbone being curled up, then your knees are going to maybe soften up a bit unless you have really loose hamstrings. And the heels may or may not touch the ground. This is a great pose for all of those muscles, of course, but it's also a really nice pose for being upside down. So it's an inversion. Anytime your head is underneath your heart, it's an inversion. It creates a reverse in the flow of gravity, reverse in the flow of blood. It brings fresh blood and oxygen to the brain. It's a nice energizing pose. Inversions, just like back bends, are energizing. So you don't want to do a ton of these at night if you're trying to relax and go to bed. So this is great for the morning. It's great to do before you have to focus or pay attention to something. Being upside down is really good for the body. It's really great for the brain. With some exception, if you have any issues with your heart, if you've got blood pressure issues, then you would either not do this pose or you'd work up to it very slowly. With any inversion or with any forward fold, I always cue my students to roll up very, very slowly. So whether or not you have a blood pressure issue, I always recommend that you roll up slowly. But if you have an issue like that, you want to make sure you want to check with an instructor before you attempt this pose. Any sort of inversion, you want to double check and make sure that that you maybe would do a modified version of this, or you would at least take extra care when doing this pose. So let's take a look at a version of this pose. So I'm actually showing you a little bit, most of the time when we come into a downward facing dog, we come up from a child's pose. We can take a moment, make sure our hands are nice and firm on the mat, and then we can push ourselves up, pushing the hips up to the sky, taking a moment to come into the down dog. It's always okay to adjust for a few moments. So I might bend my legs, I might move my arms around just to make sure that I feel secure and that I feel good in my body. And then I try to find stillness. So I want to make sure my tailbone, I'm always thinking as I'm coming into a pose of what my body should be doing. So my tailbone needs to be curled up to the sky. My legs are straight relatively, but I have open hamstrings from many, 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 many downward dogs. So please understand that if your hamstrings are not that loose, keep your knees soft and give yourself the ability to keep the tailbone curled up. Very good. This is also what I'm showing you here. Some people have issues with their wrists when they first start practicing yoga, because there's a lot of weight on your wrists in this pose. Sometimes folding the mat up and coming into a nice padding is good. Um, you can, hold on one second, let me just continue here. And slowly rolling up. I'm just demonstrating here how to come up very slowly from a downward facing dog. When you're doing down dog, you can use a padding. You can roll your yoga mat up a little bit so that it's a little bit easier on the wrists. You can also, for some people, they can come into down dog on fists. I didn't demonstrate this because I personally can't do that. It's actually not very comfortable for me. But I cue that oftentimes in class for people who have issues with their wrists. So in this video, I'm moving on to the next pose. So let's take a look at the anatomy of the next pose, and then we'll come back. All right, our next pose is mountain pose. This is Tadasana. And mountain pose, oftentimes students will say, oh, it's just kind of standing. I'm not really doing much, but there's actually a lot going on in mountain pose. You can see the muscles that are involved in mountain pose. You're standing with your feet together or hips width distance apart, and your arms are palms facing out. Your shoulder blades are down and together on the back. Your shoulders are relaxed, and your head is just nicely balancing at the top of the spine. And so you can see that there's a lot involved with this pose. There's a lot going on. And it's also a nice pose to reconnect to the breath. It's a nice pose that you can use to make sure that you are coming back into being focused on what you're doing, getting rid of distraction, and it's a nice transition pose. So let's take a look at what it looks like. So mountain poses, pretty simple, pretty stationary, pretty static. I've got my feet hips width distance apart, arms are out to the side, and I'm just focusing on stacking joints, making sure my knees are over my ankles, making sure my hips are over my knees, and my shoulders are over my hips. So it's there's a lot going on inside in this pose, and there's a lot going on in terms of muscular and skeletal. So this is mountain pose Tadasana. Our next pose is a forward fold, a standing forward fold. And this also seems like a pretty simple pose, but there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot that I will cue during our classes in terms of safety. Because for people who just kind of dump down into forward fold, they may notice that they have some pain in the low back. And so forward fold, you can see the muscles that are involved in this pose, but what I'm usually concerned with in this pose is just making sure that you are safe and that you're comfortable. So I always cue people to have soft knees, so a slight bend in the knees, again, to protect hamstrings, but also to protect the low back, and then to slowly come down into the forward fold. Again, it's not necessary for hands to reach the ground. For many people, that's not going to happen at first. So you can rest your hands on your shins, do whatever is comfortable. Allow yourself to slowly curl over, let the head drop if it's comfortable, allow the neck to stretch out. And also focus on the breathing. We always come into a forward fold on an exhale. And so it's a nice way of sort of releasing the body, coming down. It's also an inversion. The head is underneath the heart. So those with blood pressure issues are super careful in this pose. Let's take a look. So we usually reach up on an inhale, and then we come down into our exhale into the forward fold. And so I'm going to pause the video here and just kind of show you what I did when I came down to this forward fold was keep the knees nice and soft. I want to protect my low back. And then my hands can reach the ground. But again, if yours don't, you can always rest them on the shins. And I came down slowly and I came down thoughtfully, always mindful of every pose in yoga. You never want to just kind of go on autopilot. You want to be thinking, paying attention to the breath, and making sure that you know exactly what your body is doing at every point so that you can keep it safe. Take a minute to just kind of adjust and enjoy the pose. Our next pose is a seated forward fold. So in a yoga class, as the class is typically winding down, you would start to get onto the mat and do some seated poses. And forward fold is always included in a yoga class because it's very cooling. It's a nice way to signal to the body that it's time to kind of bring the energy down and to rest a little bit. So you can see here the muscles that are involved, again, the hamstrings, again, the glutes, those are involved in a lot of the poses that we do. And it's a great way of stretching out muscles that typically don't get a lot of work with a sedentary lifestyle. So when we sit and drive and, read or go to school all day long, then those muscles tend to lock in a short position. So yoga really wants to open those things up. Seated forward fold comes with the same warnings and advice as standing forward fold, making sure that you keep the knees nice and soft before you come over into the fold, not paying attention to whether you can touch your feet. That's not an end goal. It may come with time, but it's not the point of the pose. It's really just about folding down into the body, being prepared for the end of the practice, giving a few more stretches to those muscles, and just slowing down the breath and making sure that we're coming back into our practice. So let's take a moment to look at this. Make sure your feet are flexed. And then you can always kind of use your hands to walk yourself down. I can reach my feet, but again, that's not an end goal. And once you come into a nice expression of the pose, before you round over, make sure that you've got a comfortable back. Make sure that your body's in a nice position. The fold comes from the hip creases, not the low back. And then once you come as far as is comfortable, then you can roll over the body. And then let the head fall if it's comfortable, and just enjoy a few more moments of cooling and stretching. Oftentimes at the end of a practice, we will do some twists, and twists are fantastic for the body. You can see some of the muscles involved in one of the twist poses here, but more than even just a muscle pose, twists are really good for compressing and bringing fresh blood to the organs of the body. It's a great way of really working on your diaphragmatic breath. When you're in a twist, you're compressing the lungs a bit. And it's a great way to just kind of make sure you take those deep breaths and really work the lungs and really stretch them to the capacity that we rarely use on day-to-day breathing. Most of us breathe very short, shallow breaths. And so one of the major goals of yoga, of course, is to breathe well and properly. And when you're in a twist, you'll notice that it's a bit of a challenge. So it's a wonderful thing for the body. Twisting also is a great way of releasing tension in the spine. It's a great way of releasing any sort of kinks that you may have. And it's also just nice, again, as we talked about moving the spine in all 6 directions, this is a great way to get into those different planes of movement. So a seated twist, you would bend one knee and then place the foot on the opposite side of the other knee. Take a breath in, reach around, clasping the top of the knee with one arm, and then as you twist, you can use the other arm as almost a support, a kickstand almost, to support the body and to bring you deeper into the twist. When you're in a twist like this, you want to, again, cue movement to breath. You want every inhale to imagine that your spine is growing taller. And on an exhale, you want to come a little bit deeper into the twist. We inhale, we come back to center, and we change sides. Always, of course, twisting on both sides of the body. And this is where you'll notice that our bodies are not completely the same on both sides. Usually in a twist, I'll notice that one side of my body feels very different than the other. That's normal. Sometimes it changes day to day. It's perfectly fine. It's a normal thing. And we breathe. So, after all that work, you come to the end of the practice. Every yoga class will end with a Shavasana pose. Shavasana, or corpse pose, is final relaxation. It's a relatively easy pose, accessible to almost everyone. You'll notice that you are just lying down on your back. Legs are allowed to kind of flop open. Arms are on the ground next to you, palms facing up. Eyes are gently closed. You'll see some of the other cues here, thinking about hips becoming heavy and settled, allowing there to be space between the arms and the body, allowing the back of the neck to be long, and making sure that the skin across the forehead softens. This is more about making sure that your face is relaxed. Whether we know it or not, we carry a lot of tension in our face, in the muscles in our face. And so if you haven't gotten rid of that tension throughout the rest of the sequence, Shavasana is your last ditch effort to try to do it. So let that face relax and just allow yourself to feel the heaviness of the body. Allow yourself to be supported by the earth. This is a great time to let go of the yogic breathing, return to natural breath, and really just let the muscles go. There's nothing that you need to hold. There's nothing to pay attention to. It's really a time for you to just let the body be held. Let yourself feel heavy. Let yourself feel rooted and connected to the earth. It's a really, really great pose. This is in many ways, I consider this the most important pose of any yoga practice. This is where you really get to enjoy the benefits of all the other poses. It's when you really get to connect to the body and feel how strong the body is, how fluid the body is, and allow it to just be supported. We are constantly moving through our day, always doing for other people, always thinking about what we have to do next. Shavasana is our time to just let the body go. Let your body do what it needs to do. You've done the work and now enjoy the rest. So sometimes it takes a bit to just kind of adjust, make sure you're comfortable. If you're practicing yoga outdoors like I was, it can be a little hard to ignore the bugs. And but of course, this is not your time to focus on what's going on around you. If you're inside, if you're in a class, this is a time to remind yourself that you exist only on the space where your mat is, and just let yourself be connected, let yourself be supported. If you're lucky enough to practice outside, if you're comfortable practicing outside, one of the great things about Shavasana outside, and you can't hear it, but what was going on this day when I was practicing was a chorus of beautiful birds were singing in my backyard. And it was just really nice to allow myself to melt into that experience and to just know that I'm part of nature. I'm just one more being on this earth, and allow myself to just melt into that experience.